I'm Leah, 28, female, and my boyfriend called me his driver in front of his CEO at the celebration I funded. It wasn't a slip of the tongue. It wasn't a poorly timed joke. It was a calculated statement delivered with a casual laugh that was meant to elevate him by erasing me. And it happened at the peak of what should have been our shared joy, a moment entirely orchestrated and paid for by me for him. Our story began, as many do, in a way that felt like destiny. I met Leo 3 years ago at a mutual friend's barbecue. He was charming, with a smile that seemed to generate its own light and a confidence that filled any room he entered. He was a marketing associate then, full of ambition and grand speeches about his future. I was a quiet software developer, someone who found more comfort in lines of code than in lines of people. He said he loved that about me. He said my calm centered his ambition. He said we were the perfect balance. For a long time, I believed him. I work from home, a reality that has always been a point of subtle friction between us. I created and now manage two successful productivity apps. They generate a very comfortable living, more than comfortable in fact, but my work is invisible. It's me in my home office staring at screens. There are no fancy corner offices, no power lunches, no teams of people reporting to me. Leo's world, on the other hand, was all about that external validation. He lived for the performance of success. The first time I felt that sting of his embarrassment, we had been dating for about a year. He invited me to a corporate networking event. He was so excited, talking for weeks about which executives would be there. I bought a new dress, wanting to make him proud. That evening, as he introduced me to a group of his senior colleagues, he gestured vaguely in my direction and said, "And this is my friend Leah. She works with computers." A friend, the word landed like a small, cold pebble in my shoe. Works with computers. The phrase was so dismissive, so reductive, it was like saying a chef works with food. I saw the way his colleagues' eyes glazed over, their interest immediately gone. They turned back to Leo, asking about his latest project. I stood there holding a lukewarm glass of sparkling water, feeling like a ghost. Later, when I tried to talk to him about it, he brushed it off. "Oh, babe, it's just networking speak." It's complicated. I didn't want to bore them with the technical stuff. He didn't want to bore them, or he didn't want to explain why his girlfriend had a job that didn't fit the glossy corporate picture he was painting. The second sign was financial. Leo had an obsession with image that far outstripped his income. About 6 months ago, he became fixated on owning a particular brand of luxury watch. "You have to look the part to get the part, Leah," he'd say, scrolling through pictures of it on his phone. The watch cost thousands of dollars, money he simply didn't have. I had given him a supplementary credit card from my account for emergencies and shared expenses. I thought it was a sign of trust. One day, I got a fraud alert notification on my phone. It wasn't fraud. It was Leo at the watch store trying to put the purchase on our card. When I confronted him, his reaction wasn't shame, but frustration. "I was going to pay you back," he insisted, his voice tight with annoyance. "This is what it takes to get noticed in my world. Ms. Sterling, my CEO, she notices these things. It's an investment in my and our future." I ended up saying no, and the argument that followed was icy. He accused me of not supporting his career, of not understanding the pressures he was under. In the end, he gave me the silent treatment for 3 days, until I relented and loaned him the money. He wore the watch every single day, a constant, glittering reminder of his priorities. The third and perhaps most telling pattern was his constant belittling of my work-from-home lifestyle. It was never direct criticism, always couched in concern or jokes. He'd come home from his long day at the office, sigh dramatically, and say, "Must be nice to just roll out of bed and be at work." He'd see me in sweatpants at 2 p.m. and remark, "Living the dream, huh?" He couldn't grasp that my flexible hours were the result of years of disciplined work, and that my rolling out of bed often followed a night where I'd been up until 3 a.m. fixing a critical bug. To him, my success wasn't real because it didn't involve a commute, a suit, and a boss watching over his shoulder. It was quiet, it was personal, and therefore it was less than. Despite these red flags, I loved him. I saw his ambition as a fire that just needed to be properly tended. I thought my support could be the steady hand that guided him toward a success that was both real and fulfilling. So when he burst through the door 2 months ago, practically vibrating with excitement, I was thrilled for him. "Oh, I got it. I got the Sterling account," he shouted, lifting me up and spinning me around. The Sterling account was a massive deal for his marketing firm, a career-making client that everyone had been competing for. Leo had led the pitch. This was his triumph. They loved it, Leah. Ms. Sterling herself said it was one of the most compelling pitches she's seen in years. His happiness was infectious. He was on top of the world, and I felt so proud it was like my own heart might burst. We have to celebrate, I said, my mind already racing. A real celebration, something you'll never forget. Leo's face lit up. Could we? I was thinking maybe a nice dinner. No, I said, shaking my head. Not just dinner, a party, for you, your team, your executives, everyone who needs to see that you're the man who made this happen. His eyes widened. Leah, a party like that, the venues, the catering, that's a fortune. Let me worry about that, I said, smiling. This is your moment. I want to make it perfect for you. And so I did. I poured myself into planning the event. I wasn't just funding it, I was producing it. I found the most exclusive rooftop venue downtown, the Azure Lounge, with breathtaking 360-degree views of the city. I hired a renowned catering company, arranged for an open bar with top-shelf liquor, and even booked a live jazz trio. I handled every contract, every email, every phone call. I wanted Leo to just be able to show up and be the star of the show. He was ecstatic, telling me every day how amazing I was, how he couldn't have done any of this without me. For those few weeks, it felt like we were finally that perfect team he always talked about. I thought this grand gesture would finally make him see my success not as a quiet, strange thing, but as something real and powerful that could lift us both up. I was so terribly, devastatingly wrong. The night of the party was electric. The city spread out below the Azure Lounge like a carpet of diamonds. The air was warm with the promise of a perfect summer evening, and the soft, sophisticated notes of the jazz trio filled the space. I had arrived early to make sure every detail was in place, the floral arrangements, the placement of the bar, the lighting, everything was perfect. I felt a surge of pride, not for myself, but for what I had created for Leo. He arrived looking like a movie star. He wore a tailored suit that I knew he'd stressed over for weeks, and on his wrist, the gleaming watch that served as a symbol of his ambition. When he saw the venue, his jaw literally dropped. He walked around in a daze, touching the back of a velvet chair, looking up at the string lights I'd had installed. Leah, this is unbelievable, he whispered, pulling me into a hug. This is better than anything I could have ever imagined. He kissed me, a deep, grateful kiss that made me feel like all the effort, all the expense was worth it. For that moment, standing there in his arms, with the city lights twinkling around us, I felt completely and utterly happy. His colleagues began to arrive, and Leo transformed. He became the host, the man of the hour. He moved through the crowd with an easy grace, accepting congratulations, his laughter booming. I watched from a slight distance, content to be the quiet force behind his spectacular night. I saw him introduce his team to his department head. I saw him shake hands with vice presidents. And then I saw her. Ms. Elizabeth Sterling, the CEO, she was an imposing woman in her 50s with sharp, intelligent eyes and an air of authority that needed no introduction. She commanded respect without saying a word. Leo's posture immediately straightened when he saw her. This was the moment his entire evening was built around. I watched as he led her toward the best viewpoint on the rooftop, gesturing at the skyline. They were deep in conversation. I felt a little pang of wanting to be part of it, but I pushed it down. This was his night. My role was to support him from the sidelines. After a few minutes, I noticed his glass was empty. A perfect opportunity, I thought, to be the attentive girlfriend. I made my way to the bar. A glass of the best champagne you have, please, I told the bartender with a smile. He popped a fresh bottle of Dom Perignon, something I had specifically requested for the top executives, and handed me a bubbling flute. Holding the glass carefully, I started walking back toward Leo and Miss Sterling. The jazz music swirled around me, the murmur of conversation was a happy hum, and I felt a quiet joy in this simple act of care. As I got closer, I could hear Leo's voice, animated and confident. And that's when I realized the key wasn't just marketing to a new demographic, but creating a new demographic for the market, he was saying. Ms. Sterling nodded, a small, approving smile on her lips. I was about 5 feet away when Leo noticed me approaching. His eyes met mine for a fleeting second. I smile. Sad's ready to hand him his drink, maybe even get that introduction I didn't get a year ago. But then something in his expression shifted. A flicker of something annoyance, panic. Before I could process it, he turned back to Miss Sterling, cutting me off before I could even speak. He gestured dismissively in my direction, not even looking at me, his hand waving me away like I was a persistent fly. "Oh, thank you," he said, his voice loud enough for me, Miss Sterling, and anyone nearby to hear clearly. He didn't take the glass. "You can just put it on the table over there." My feet stopped, my smile froze on my face. The champagne flute suddenly felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. It couldn't be, I must have misheard. But then he sealed my fate. He gave a light, condescending laugh, a sound I had never heard from him before, and added, for the benefit of his esteemed CEO, "It's so hard to find good help these days. She's my driver for the evening." The world went silent. The jazz music, the chatter, the clinking of glasses, it all faded into a dull, roaring buzz in my ears. My driver, he hadn't just ignored me, he hadn't just called me a friend. He had looked at me, the woman who loved him, the woman who orchestrated this entire triumphant evening for him from her own pocket, and assigned me the role of a paid servant. He had erased Leah, his girlfriend, his partner of 3 years, and replaced her with an anonymous, nameless employee. I saw Miss Sterling's gaze flicker over to me. Her expression was unreadable, a blank mask of corporate politeness, but I felt her eyes on me, this person who had just been labeled as the help. In that instant, I felt a wave of humiliation so profound it was physical. It was a cold, sickening tide that rose from my stomach into my throat. My face burned, but I felt ice cold all over. I was completely, utterly exposed. He didn't even glance back. He had already turned his full attention back to his boss, continuing with his story as if he hadn't just shattered the universe of the person standing right behind him. He had used my love and my resources to build a stage for himself, and when I stepped onto it, he hadn't just pushed me off, he had made sure I knew I was never meant to be on it in the first place. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, the champagne flute trembling in my hand. The bubbles fizzled and died, and in their place something new was born. The heartbreak was still there, a deep, catastrophic wound. But cutting through the pain was a new feeling, something cold and sharp and absolutely clear. It was the chilling clarity of betrayal, and in that clarity I knew exactly what I had to do. I didn't cry, I didn't scream. I didn't throw the champagne in Leo's perfectly styled hair as much as a small, savage part of my brain wanted me to. Instead, I turned around with a slow, deliberate calmness that I didn't know I possessed. I walked back to the table he had gestured to and placed the flute down with a steady hand. The sound of the glass meeting the wood was a soft, final click. It was the sound of a door closing. The roar in my ears subsided, replaced by an unnerving silence in my mind. The pain was a physical ache in my chest, but my thoughts were suddenly like ice. He wanted to treat me like the help. He wanted to pretend that my only function was to serve his ambition. Fine. The help was about to clock out, and she was taking the party with her. My first stop was the event manager, a polished man named Julian whom I had spent weeks coordinating with. I found him near the entrance, overseeing his staff. He saw me approaching and gave me a warm, professional smile. "Ms. Hayes," he said brightly, "everything is to your satisfaction, I hope. It's a wonderful turnout." "Julian, it's a beautiful party," I said, my voice even and calm. It was a strange, out-of-body experience. I sounded like myself, but I felt like a stranger. "I need to make a change to our arrangement for the evening. Effective immediately, the open bar is closed." Julian's smile faltered. He blinked confused. "Closed? I'm sorry, I don't understand. The bar service was prepaid for the entire 4-hour block." "I understand that," I replied, meeting his gaze without flinching. "But the host of the party has had a change of plans. The open bar is to be closed now. Guests can open their own tabs if they wish to continue drinking. Furthermore, the final round of hot appetizers that was scheduled for 10 p.m. is canceled. You and your staff can begin breaking down the food stations." Julian looked utterly bewildered. He glanced over my shoulder toward the main party area where Leah was still deep in conversation with Miss Sterling, oblivious. But Mr. Romano didn't say anything to me. "Mr. Romano didn't pay for the services, Julian," I did, I said, my voice dropping a fraction, gaining an edge of steel I didn't know it had. The contract is with me, Leah Hayes, and I am terminating the service agreement for the remainder of the evening. You and your team will still be paid in full for the entire contracted time, of course, but the party is, for all intents and purposes, over. The mention of the contract and the money snapped him back into professional mode. He saw the look on my face and understood that this was not a negotiation. Of course, Ms. Hayes, right away, he said, nodding stiffly. He turned and began speaking quietly into his headset. I didn't wait to watch the fallout. I walked to a quiet, secluded corner of the rooftop, a small alcove with a single bench overlooking a darker, less glamorous part of the city. I sat down, the cool night air feeling good against my burning cheeks. I pulled out my phone, its screen a bright rectangle in the dim light. My fingers moved with a detached, methodical precision. First, I opened the app for the luxury car service I used. I had booked a private car for Leo for the entire next month to shuttle him to and from work and client meetings so he could arrive in style. It was meant to be a congratulatory gift. I found the booking, tap cancel reservation. A pop-up asked, "Are you sure a cancellation fee may apply?" I tapped confirm without a second's hesitation. Next, I opened my banking app. I navigated to the credit card section. I saw the main card in my name and the supplementary card I had given to Leo, the one he'd used for his watch, his expensive lunches, his designer ties. I tapped on his card. A menu of options appeared: freeze card, report lost or stolen, cancel card. I pressed freeze card. Another confirmation screen. This will decline all future transactions. Perfect, I confirmed. The little digital image of the card grayed out, another tie severed. Finally, the most painful one, I went to my email and searched for Tuscany. A confirmation email from a five-star hotel and spa in Florence appeared, complete with airline tickets. It was a surprise for our 3-year anniversary next month, a romantic trip I had been dreaming of, a trip I had paid for in full. I stared at the itinerary, the beautiful pictures of the rolling hills and the stunning hotel. A wave of grief washed over me, so intense it almost made me double over. This wasn't just canceling a service, this was canceling a future. This was admitting that the dreams I had built around us were nothing but smoke. Tears pricked my eyes, but I blinked them back fiercely. I would not cry for a future that was never real. With a trembling finger, I forwarded the entire confirmation to my personal email, then navigated to the airline and hotel websites. I found the cancellation policies. I would lose a significant deposit, but I didn't care. It was a small price to pay for my freedom. Tap, cancel, tap, confirm. It was done. In the space of less than 10 minutes, I had systematically dismantled the scaffolding of support I had so carefully built around Leo's life. I had turned off the money, the convenience, the future plans. All that was left was him, standing in the middle of a party he couldn't afford, wearing a watch he hadn't earned, trying to impress a CEO who would soon find out the truth. I stood up, took one last look at the glittering city, and walked towards the elevators, not looking back. I didn't need to see the chaos erupt. I could already imagine it. I had lit the fuse and I was walking away, leaving the sound of the explosion for everyone else to hear. As the elevator doors slid shut, sealing me in a quiet silver box, I felt a single hot tear finally escape and trace a path down my cold cheek. It wasn't a tear of sadness, it was a tear of release. The silence of my apartment was a stark contrast to the party I had just left behind. The only sound was the soft hum of the refrigerator and the distant wail of a siren in the city streets below. I walked through the rooms, my home, which was also our home. His shoes were by the door. His jacket was slung over a dining chair. His presence was everywhere, a ghost in a life that was no longer ours. I didn't sit, I couldn't be still. My mind was still running on that cold, clear fuel of adrenaline and heartbreak. I knew what was happening back at the Azure Lounge. I could picture it perfectly. The jazz trio would be packing up their instruments. The bartenders would be politely telling confused guests that the open bar was now a cash bar, producing credit card machines. The catering staff would be whisking away the silver platters of half-eaten hors d'oeuvres. The confusion would ripple through the crowd first. Then the questions would turn to Leo. What's going on? Is the party over? He, still basking in the glow of his conversation with Miss Sterling, would be completely blindsided. I could imagine his confident smile faltering, his eyes darting around, searching for me, the fixer, the planner, but I wouldn't be there. He would have to face the event manager, Julian, who would inform him with cold professionalism that the benefactor of the event had terminated the services. The word benefactor would hang in the air, a cruel echo of his own word, driver. The humiliation would be swift and absolute, unfolding in front of the very people he was most desperate to impress. My phone, which I'd left on the kitchen counter, lit up. It was a text from Leo. "Where are you? Bar is closing." I stared at the screen, my expression blank. I didn't reply. A minute later, another text. "Leo, what is going on? The manager said you canceled everything. Is this a joke?" Still, I said nothing. Then a phone call. His face, smiling in the caller ID photo we took on vacation last year, felt like a relic from another lifetime. I silenced the call and put the phone face down on the counter. The vibrations, however, continued, a frantic, desperate buzzing against the granite. He was beginning to understand, not the emotional gravity of what he'd done, not yet, but the practical consequences. The public shame, that I knew would be the first thing to pierce his armor of self-importance. I needed to do something to channel the storm of emotion inside me into a physical act. I walked into our bedroom, opened the closet, and looked at his side. It was packed with clothes I had bought for him, suits he said he needed for work, shirts he claimed were essential for his image. I reached in and pulled out an armful of expensive shirts, letting them fall to the floor, then another and another. I found an empty suitcase in the back of the closet, one we had used for weekend trips. I opened it on the bed and began to pack his life away. Each item I touched told a story of his superficiality. The silk ties, so many of them, each one a small fortune. I remembered him agonizing over which one to wear for his pitch, as if the pattern of the silk held the key to his success, not the content of his work. I folded them neatly and placed them in the suitcase. The ridiculously expensive grooming products that lined his side of the bathroom counter, potions and lotions that promised to project an aura of power and youth. I swept them all into a toiletry bag. He cared more about the smoothness of his skin than the state of his integrity. Then I came across the watch box. Empty, of course, because the watch itself was on his wrist, a shining testament to his priorities, but inside the box was the receipt. I had kept it for the warranty. I picked it up and looked at the staggering number. An investment, he had called it. I crumpled the receipt in my fist and tossed it into the suitcase. As I worked, my phone continued its relentless assault. The texts became more frantic, a stream of consciousness filled with confusion, then anger, then a dawning, panicked fear. "Zelia, answer me. You have no idea what you've done. You've humiliated me. In front of my CEO, are you insane? What am I supposed to tell people? Please just call me. We can fix this." Fix this? He still thought this was a logistical problem, a mess that could be cleaned up. He had no concept of the real damage, the wound he had inflicted on my soul. He wasn't sorry for what he did, he was sorry for how it was making him look. I packed the last of his things, his running shoes, his favorite coffee mug, the framed photo of us from his desk. The apartment started to feel bigger, emptier. It was starting to feel like mine again. I zipped the suitcases, 3 of them in total, and lined them up neatly by the front door. I finally picked up my phone. I had over 20 missed calls and a dozen texts. I didn't read them all. I just opened a new message, my thumb hovering over the screen. What could I possibly say? What words could convey the depth of my pain and the finality of my decision? In the end, I typed only once. "Goodbye." I sent the text, and then, with a feeling of profound relief, I blocked his number. I blocked him on every social media platform. I digitally erased him from my life as completely as he had tried to erase me from his party. I stood in the center of my quiet, half-empty living room. The storm outside had passed. The storm inside was finally beginning to calm. The person who had left this apartment a few hours ago, giddy with love and pride, was gone forever. The woman who remained was someone new. She was hurt, yes, but she was not broken. She was alone, but she was not weak. And for the first time in a very long time, she was seeing things clearly. The next morning, I woke up feeling like I hadn't slept at all. The events of the previous night played on a loop in my mind: the rooftop, the lights, Leo's voice, the cold weight of the champagne flute. But alongside the pain was a strange, hollowed out sense of peace. The decision had been made, there was no going back. At around 9 a.m., the inevitable happened. A loud, insistent pounding on my front door. It wasn't the polite knock of a neighbor, it was the frantic, angry fist of some me who felt entitled to be let in. I knew it was Leo. I looked through the peephole. It was him, his face a mess of anger and sleeplessness. His perfect suit was rumpled, his hair was out of place, and he looked smaller, less confident without the adoring crowd and fancy lighting. "Leah, I know you're in there. Open this door," he yelled, his voice muffled. I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and unlocked the door, opening it just enough to block his entry with my body. His 3 suitcases stood between us like a fortress wall. "Leo," I said, my voice steady. His eyes, wild and bloodshot, fixed on me. "Leah, what have you done?" he demanded, trying to push past me. I held my ground. "I think the question is, what have you done?" I countered, my voice dangerously quiet. "It was a joke, a stupid, stupid joke," he sputtered, his hands waving in the air. I was nervous. Miss Sterling was right there. I was trying to be charming, I don't know. "Charming," I repeated the word, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. "You thought erasing my identity and demoting me to your chauffeur was charming? You didn't introduce me, Leo. You dismissed me. You used me as a prop to make yourself look more powerful and independent." He had the grace to look momentarily ashamed, but it was quickly replaced by defensiveness. "You're overreacting. It was one dumb comment. You didn't have to destroy the entire night. You embarrassed me. I had VPs asking me what happened. I looked like a fool." "You were embarrassed?" I asked, my voice rising slightly despite my efforts to control it. "You want to talk about embarrassment, Leo? Try standing there while the man you love, the man whose success you just spent a small fortune to celebrate, tells his boss that you're the hired help. Try feeling yourself become invisible in a room full of people. That is embarrassment." I gestured to the suitcases. "It's all there, everything. I suggest you call a taxi." His face went pale as he finally, truly registered the finality of the luggage. "Leah, no, you can't be serious. 3 years. You're throwing away 3 years over one stupid sentence." "That sentence wasn't the disease, Leo. It was a symptom," I said, my voice hardening. "It was the culmination of every time you called me a friend who works with computers, every time you belittled my job, every time you prioritized the appearance of success over actual substance. Last night, I just finally saw it all clearly." He was about to argue more, to plead, or to rage when his phone buzzed loudly in his pocket. He ignored it. It buzzed again. Annoyed, he pulled it out, his expression souring even more as he looked at the screen. "It's my office," he muttered, a new kind of anxiety creeping into his eyes. "Ms. Sterling wants to see me now." He looked at me, a flicker of his old self returning. "This is your fault if she's upset about the party." "Then you'd better go," I said, and before he could say another word, I closed the door in his face, locking it securely. I leaned against the door, my heart pounding. The confrontation had drained me, but it had also solidified my resolve. For the next 2 hours, there was silence. I made myself coffee and sat in my home office trying to work, but my mind was elsewhere. I was waiting. I didn't know for what exactly, but I knew the story wasn't over. Then my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. "Leah," it was Leo's voice, but it was completely different. The anger was gone, the arrogance was gone. It was a thin, hollowed-out whisper laced with pure, unadulterated panic. "What do you want, Leo?" I asked tiredly. I just came from my meeting with Miss Sterling," he stammered. I waited, saying nothing. He took a shaky breath. "It wasn't about the party ending. She barely mentioned it. She said it was unfortunate, but that wasn't why she called me in." He paused, and I could hear him swallow hard. "She called me in to ask me about my driver." I froze. "What?" "Your words, Leah, not mine," he said quickly. She said, Mr. Romano, I was intrigued by your comments last night. She wanted to know more about the help I had hired, so she had her assistant look you up. A cold dread mixed with a bizarre sense of vindication washed over me. She found out who you are, Leah, Leo's voice cracked. She didn't just find out you're my girlfriend, she found out you're Leah Hayes, the creator of ZenFlow. ZenFlow, my most successful app, the one that had made my career. It turns out, Leo continued, his voice barely audible, that our parent company just signed a seven-figure deal last month to license ZenFlow for all 10,000 of its employees worldwide. Ms. Sterling signed off on it herself. She thinks you're a genius. She's been following your work. She called you a visionary in workplace productivity. The silence on the line was deafening. I sank into my chair, my head spinning. She looked me right in the eye, Leah, he whispered, the horror fresh in his voice. And she said, so let me get this straight. You brought one of the most innovative software developers in the country, a woman whose product my company is investing millions in, to a party celebrating your success. And you introduced her to me as your driver. He didn't need to tell me the rest. I could imagine the scene in perfect, excruciating detail. The cold disappointment in Miss Sterling's eyes, the realization dawning on Leo that he hadn't just disrespected his girlfriend, he had insulted a respected business peer of his CEO. He had revealed himself to be not a shark, but a fool, a small, insecure man who had been handed a diamond and had mistaken it for a piece of glass. Leah, he choked out, the desperation palpable. I am so sorry. I had no idea. I am such an idiot. Please, we have to fix this. And there it was. I had no idea. He was sorry because he got caught. He was sorry because my identity had value in his world now. His apology wasn't for my pain. It was for his catastrophic miscalculation. The shock wasn't that he had hurt me. The shock was that the person he had hurt was, in his world, important. There is nothing to fix, Leo, I said, and my voice was the calmest it had been in 24 hours. You've shown me exactly who you are. Thank you for the clarity. I ended the call before he could say another word. The real shock, I realized, wasn't for me. It was for him. He was the one left staring into the abyss of his own making, having destroyed his relationship, his reputation, and likely his career, all with one casual, cruel sentence. In the days that followed, Leo's desperation escalated into a full-blown campaign. It started with voicemails left from his work phone since I had blocked his personal number. They were rambling, pathetic apologies, all circling the same theme, his newfound respect for my work. I was reading about ZenFlow, Leah. It's incredible, the user interface, the integration. I just never understood the scale of it, one message went. You're brilliant, I always knew you were smart, but this is another level. He didn't seem to realize that every compliment he paid my work now only highlighted how little he had valued it before. He wasn't praising me. He was praising my stock value, which had suddenly skyrocketed in his estimation. Then came the emails to my work address. My dearest Leah, one began, I have been doing some soul searching and I realize how deeply my insecurity has poisoned our love. It was full of therapy speak and hollow promises, all of it feeling like a script he had copied from a bad movie. He talked about his own shame and his desire to be a man worthy of me, but it was too little, far too late. He wasn't trying to win back my heart, he was trying to salvage his own wreckage. The final, most audacious attempt came a week after the party. My doorbell rang, and when I looked on the security camera feed, I saw a delivery man with a ridiculously large bouquet of roses. I buzzed him in, and he delivered the flowers along with a small velvet box. I knew what it was before I even opened it. Inside was a delicate diamond necklace, far more expensive than anything he could possibly afford, especially now. There was a card. I know I can't buy your forgiveness, it read. But I hope this shows you how much you're worth to me. I was a fool. Let me spend the rest of my life making it up to you. All my love, Leo. I stared at the necklace. It was beautiful, but it felt cold and transactional. It was another prop, another attempt to purchase a feeling. He still didn't get it. My worth wasn't something he could appraise and assign a dollar value to. My worth was inherent, and he had treated it as worthless. I put the necklace back in its box. I took the flowers and the box downstairs and left them by the mailboxes with a sign that said, free. I walked back up to my apartment, feeling nothing but a profound sense of detachment. He was a stranger to me now, his grand gestures as meaningless as his initial insult. That part of my life was over. I went into my office, sat down at my desk, and for the first time in a week, I felt the creative spark return. I opened a new project file and began to code, losing myself in the familiar logic and clean lines of my work. I was building something new for myself. 2 days later, an email landed in my inbox that made my heart stop for a completely different reason. The sender's name was Elizabeth Sterling. The subject line was simple: potential collaboration. My hands trembled slightly as I clicked it open. Dear Ms. Hayes, I hope this email finds you well. My name is Elizabeth Sterling, CEO of Sterling Marketing Group. I'm writing to you today not just as a CEO, but as a great admirer of your work. My company has recently implemented your ZenFlow application and the impact on our team's product. Activity and morale has been nothing short of remarkable. It is an elegant, intuitive, and powerful tool. I had the unfortunate experience of being at a social event last week where I witnessed a disappointing lack of professionalism from one of my junior executives. While the circumstances were regrettable, they had the unintended, and for me, very fortunate consequence of bringing your identity to my attention. I have long believed that the future of marketing is not just in creative campaigns, but in the technological infrastructure that supports them. After reviewing your portfolio and the architecture of your applications, I believe your skills could be invaluable to my company in a more direct capacity. I would be very interested in discussing the possibility of a strategic partnership or a consulting role to help my company develop our own proprietary workflow solutions, with you at the helm of the project. I understand this is unexpected, but I believe in acting on talent when I see it. Please let me know if you would be open to a preliminary conversation next week. Sincerely, Elizabeth Sterling. I read the email 3 times. My breath was caught in my throat. This wasn't just a job offer, it was a life raft. It was a hand reaching out from the world that Leo had tried so hard to keep me from, a world that I was now being invited into not as a guest or a driver, but as a leader. Ms. Sterling hadn't just seen through Leo's pathetic lie, she had seen me. She had seen my work, my value, my potential. A slow smile spread across my face. It was the first genuine, unburdened smile I'd had in what felt like an eternity. Leo's betrayal had been an act of erasure, an attempt to make me small so he could feel big. But the universe had a funny way of balancing the scales. His attempt to push me down had inadvertently launched me up higher than I could have imagined. He had tried to close a door on me, and in doing so, had pushed me through a gate into a whole new world of opportunity. I took a deep breath, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. I was no longer the quiet supporter in the background. I was Leah Hayes, a visionary in workplace productivity, and I had a meeting to schedule. It's been 6 months since the night of the party. The 3 suitcases belonging to Leo were picked up by a courier he sent. We never saw each other again. Sometimes I hear things about him through the grapevine. His career at Sterling Marketing stalled completely. He wasn't fired, but he was sidelined, given meaningless projects, and frozen out of any real opportunities for advancement. He became a ghost in the halls he once strode through with so much arrogance. Last I heard, he had quit and was working for a much smaller, less prestigious firm across town. He had played for the top and lost spectacularly. As for me, my life has transformed. My initial meeting with Ms. Sterling, or Elizabeth, as she insisted I call her, was less of an interview and more of a meeting of minds. We talked for hours about technology, workflow, and the future of creative industries. She is everything Leo pretended to be: brilliant, confident, and utterly secure in her own success, with no need to diminish others to elevate herself. I took the consulting deal. For the past 4 months, I've been leading a project to build a custom management platform for her entire company. It's challenging, exhilarating work. I now have an office at the Sterling Tower, a beautiful space with a view of the city that rivals the one from the Azure Lounge. I don't use it every day. I still love the freedom of working from home, But I go in for key meetings, striding through the lobby not as a driver or a friend who works with computers, but as a respected partner. People know my name, they know my work. The pain of Leo's betrayal has faded, leaving behind not a scar but a valuable lesson. For 3 years, I had shrunk myself to fit into his world. I had downplayed my success because it made him uncomfortable. I had funded his ambitions, hoping that his success would feel like our success. I now realize that a true partner doesn't ask you to dim your light so they can shine brighter. A true partner stands with you and you shine together. The most profound change has been within me. I no longer seek external validation for my work or my worth. The quiet satisfaction I get from solving a complex problem or writing a perfect piece of code is enough. The respect I've earned from Elizabeth and her team is a wonderful bonus, but it's not the foundation of my self-esteem. That foundation is now built on my own abilities, my own integrity, and my own refusal to be made small. Last week, I was working late at my office in the Sterling Tower. As I packed up my bag, I looked out the window at the city lights, the same lights that had formed the backdrop to my heartbreak. They looked different now. They didn't look like a party I wasn't invited to. They looked like a world of possibilities, a world that was mine for the taking. That single, cruel sentence, "She's my driver for the evening," was meant to be my undoing. Instead, it was my liberation. It was the shock to the system I needed to wake up and see the truth. He didn't just call me his driver, he drove me straight into the life I was always meant to have, a life where I am firmly and unapologetically in the driver's seat. So I have to ask you, the audience listening to my story, what would you have done in that moment? Would you have caused a scene? Would you have walked away quietly? Sometimes the most powerful response isn't a loud explosion, but the quiet, deliberate act of reclaiming your own power.